Alright, so as I do this last page and go to the back of the room, I'm going to let you know that this is Mark from LTX. He's an attorney and also has a title company. He's been in business for a really long time. He actually did some settlements with some of our Aberdeen agents, Dundalk agents, Parkville agents, Pasadena agents, so he's been around, yeah. So I'm going to let him take over and tell you a little bit what he knows about short sales. So if you don't mind, I'm going to do that while you're talking.
No problem, thanks. So guys, you all don't know me, maybe some of you do. My name's Mark Whittstadt. I've been practicing law for 27 years. Get into his camera. I've been practicing law for 27 years. For all of that period of time, I've pretty much done real estate work. I've done other things too, but the majority of my work has been involved in real estate. In 2002, 2001, I started representing banks. And then from 2002, 2001 to 2015, we grew our business during the foreclosure crisis. You remember? And we grew it to the point where we were doing foreclosure work for every single bank in the country in 16 different states. And I ran the entire foreclosure, bankruptcy, and eviction units and the REO side of our firm for a very long time. Foreclosure started to go away, but mark my words, there's going to be another tick in 20 and 21, and that can be enough for another day. But in today's world, there's still a lot of short sales. Okay, and when we were representing the banks, I would be on the bank side. And if they were in foreclosure, I would have to, part of it was a waterfall of loss mitigation opportunities. One of the loss mitigation opportunities is a short sale. But it's full of landmines. And if you don't know what you're doing, all you're going to do is not get it to where it needs to be. And we had to deal with a number of folks that thought they knew what they were doing in short sales. And probably back in 10 and 11, and Lisa can correct me about this, in 12, a lot of real estate agents were trying to jump in. First of all, you weren't getting paid to do it, okay? And you were doing it, and it was a lot of problems, but you couldn't get paid to do it. And second, and it was so frustrating to deal with the banks because you would deal with one person and send them a bunch of documents, and then 2 weeks later, you'd get somebody else, and they would say, well, I need this. And you're like, I just sent, and you'd pull your hair out. And you're fighting over a $150,000 listing, which you're going to make $3,200 if you split it with somebody else, right? That's your total all-in commission. And you're spending hours and hours doing something that, first of all, you weren't trained to do, and second of all, wasn't worth the time. And then they passed some regulations about it, and you have to have certain licensing, and you have to have certain credentials and whatever. So people like Lisa's company started doing them. And we started dealing with more professional people that knew what they were doing. And Lisa's group was one of them. And she was the group that really succeeded. And when she had her short sale packages and we were doing a foreclosure, we could understand that things would move through the process a lot better. So when I left for the foreclosure realm and started getting back and doing my real estate closings and that kind of thing, which we do a lot of, I partnered up with Lisa to help her with her short sales. And so you need to know what to do. If you don't do it every day, you don't know what to do because the banks, the regulations change, their forms change. You have to upload this to Citi, but you have to upload that to Bank of America. If you're dealing with Aquin or Bovéll or one of these other servicing, Select Portfolio Servicing, all of which were clients of mine, and still are, their requirements were different, and it's just not worth the time. So if you do have a short sale, and you're in that short sale situation, I can't tell you how much I recommend for you to go see Lisa about that, because first of all, it's not going to cost your seller anything. She's not allowed to charge up front. She gets paid at the table. if they come see a lawyer, we can charge up front. We are allowed to, but I don't even do it. What she does, and the way we do it together is if you get it, then she gives it to me, I clear the title work. And if she runs into a roadblock with somebody that's being extremely difficult with her, she'll ask me to get involved, and then I'll pull out my cell phone and I'll call the guy that heads up loss mitigation for Bank of America, or the lady that does it for Citi, or the man down at Aquin. But I don't call them on every single one, because if I start calling on every single one to the head guy, he's not going to take my phone calls anymore. So it's only very, very rare that I have to call, and it's because Lisa's group and she knows what they're doing. So I wanted to introduce Lisa, and I'm sorry, Gordon, that's right. And these two, Lisa runs the day-to-day operations. Gordon's the business manager. So thank you very much for coming. I appreciate it.
Excuse me, Mark. What's your company?
Mine is, I have a company called LTX Companies, which is two. It is my law firm, which is LTX Law Group, and Lawyers Title Exchange. Okay. Those are mine. I have some cards in my pocket. Lisa has them too, okay. And I'd be happy to pass them out. And if I can help you guys in any way in that regard, doing the closings on your regular stuff. Look, everybody, there's all lots of problems, and I can clean up a lot of problems for people that don't involve short sales. Mm-hmm. But just like you, I like easy stuff too. And not everybody wants to work every single day beating their head up against the wall to make money. I mean, sometimes you just want an easy deal. So I'll take the easy ones just as much as I'll take your hard ones. But yes, I can help you in that regard as well. Okay?
Good morning.
Good morning.
So let's just open this up. I want to welcome you all here for coming so early. Yeah. Is it early? Not that early, huh? Well, it's early enough, right? So, I have two questions. Raise your hands if you came here, very simple, this morning. You want to hear about how you can close more transactions, earn more money by working smarter and closing those transactions faster. Raise your hands. No, nobody with their hands down? Everyone's got their hands up? Yes? How about this question? How many of you came in this morning because you want to learn how you could work harder and earn less money by closing your transactions slower? No one, right? Well, I'm glad to hear that. So, work smart, close fast. Short sales done for you. The title, Short Sales Done For You, says it all. And with that, I'd like to introduce a very special person who came up with this title and this company, who does amazing work on the back end while I come to the front and present to you. And that's Lisa Wood, the founder and owner of Short Sales Done For You. Give her a hand. Lisa's going to answer all of your questions after my short presentation. And she's the expert, as Mark said, on anything and everything you need to know about short sales. So Lisa, I'll call you up when I'm done here.
Great.
Appreciate it. Thank you. So, before we get started, has anyone read this book? I heard of this gentleman? No? 1913. Today we're living in a time of Aldous Huxley where we have smartphones, everything we do, social media, we don't connect with each other, person to person as much as we used to. We're living in 1984, if you read that book or saw that movie. Pretty much, most human beings have an almost infinite capacity for taking things for granted. And I say this because this should be very familiar to everyone. Just over 10 years ago, stock market crash, right? We saw all of this. We lived through it. If you were in real estate back then, you may have felt some of this happening. Homes being taken over by banks, foreclosures. Developers cut short their development midway. Half the homes developed, half the homes not developed in the community. Banks went into the REO business, real estate owned, no longer just lending capital, they now owned property. And what happened with that? Auctions started to develop. Thousands and thousands of people were in auction rooms buying homes and pennies on the dollar that previously couldn't afford. If you were in Florida, in some parts of the country, you had tours to go into communities to see homes that were block by block foreclosed upon. That was the whole business model. And Baltimore, of course, suffered tremendously for it. Those of you who lived in Baltimore, and it's going to suffer even more in the next downturn. So this was Capitol Hill. This is when the lawmakers told us we're going to fix this problem. And how many billions and hundreds of billions? Actually ended up being $900 billion that the federal government gave to corporations and businesses. And Ben Bernanke, at the time, who was the Fed chair, made this comment in 2007. Subprime mortgage woes won't seriously hurt economy. Yeah, we should have put some money on that one, right? Well, here's what happened, according to Atom Data Solutions. It was only just under 3% effect to the market. But look what happened to the economy. Just 2.23% of homes went into foreclosures. That's not a whole lot, is it? However, here's why you should be worried. The stock market is everyone who's invested in it, and if you have a pension fund, a 401k, retirement, it's in the stock market. It's doing great, gangbusters right now, right? This, as of last night, shows you the trend line from 2006. You saw that crash right there? 2008 into 9. Here's where we are. So the market has more than doubled what it was prior to 2008. Here's where we are. So what do you think is going to happen when this market crashes? How far down do we need to fall? How far down do we have to fall? The crash is coming. Mark just alluded to that. 2021, I believe Mark said. Is that what he said? Yeah, 2021. I'll tell you, the recession has already started. It already has. In 2008, they say we weren't in a recession. By 2010, they said, oh, by the way, the recession started in 2008. It takes the government about a couple of years to realize, where is this all happening? When is it expecting to cause more pain? So short sales and foreclosures. Here's why it's guaranteed to happen. It's the everywhere debt. This is what I call it. And let me explain what that everywhere debt looks like. The national debt. Has anyone looked at this lately? Mm-hmm. U.S. national debt, $22 trillion. 22, that hit 3 weeks ago? A month ago. Mm-hmm. So a month ago, we did a presentation in Winchester. The night before, I prepped the presentation. It was at 21 trillion. The next morning, I went to do the presentation. It went 22 trillion, so I had to redo the presentation. $22 trillion. This is what it looks like. If you haven't seen this, this is the usdebtclock.org. This is a live, and by the way, if anyone is curious what that looks like, live, this is what it looks like, live. Those tickers are happening right now. The debt, second by second, increases. State, personal debt, consumer debt, business debt, U.S. government debt, second by second. So Donald Trump, unfortunately, has put $2 trillion in the debt in the time he's been in office. $2 trillion. By the time in the next 4 years, we're expecting another 2 to 3 trillion. So really, why is that a big concern to any of us? Or why should it be a big concern to any of us? Though the Fed is not concerned about the debt, here's where it starts to get a big problem. The corporate debt, $9 trillion. Think about that, corporate debt. If corporations cannot afford their own cash flow, cannot afford to run their businesses on their own revenue, sales, generating revenue, what does that mean for employment and the workers? Here's where it was back all the way from 1980 to where we are now. The debt in corporate America, which transcends us to the rise in consumer debt. Return on consumer debt. By the way, all these articles, I post articles because I like to be fact-based, so you can go and look this up yourself. If you want to just, and your clients as well, you want them to let them know, hey, this market is going to change. The trend is here. There's nothing we can do about it. We just need to adapt and prepare ourselves for how we're going to handle the next 10 years of our business and our lives. This chart shows household debt. Mortgage, of course, takes up the most, for most Americans. Unfortunately, what did most people do in the last 2 to 5 years? They bought a house at a inflated value, right? Now let's just be honest. It's unreasonably inflated value for just about everywhere, with the exception of a few Midwest states. If you are putting that much into your mortgage, the challenge that you have, so $13.1 trillion mortgage debt. It's the biggest economy in the world. Globally, it's almost $200 trillion. 70% of it residential real estate, globally. The problem that we see today exists in Australia, Canada, the UK, all over Europe. It's not just an American problem. Just to give you an idea of how this composition breaks down, mortgage debt, home equity revolving, auto, credit, student loan. Auto and credit and student loan, I'll cover in a moment. Those are going to be just as bad or worse. Now, presently, this is where the numbers are expected to go at 13.54 trillion as of end of last year. So the debt balance, mortgage debt, non-mortgage, 8.8 trillion. And one last thing here, delinquencies are on the rise. Here's why we're here. We've spent, is it a year and a half now, Lisa?
Yes.
A year and a half we've been working on this, looking at all of these trends and preparing for the next year and a half. We've put in multiple hours per day in that year and a half to help everyone understand on the real estate side, as a broker and as agents, that it's now the time to prepare yourself for that next crash. It's not because of subprime loans. And by the way, the market has already started to introduce subprime lending. We all know this, right? Now, sub 620, 560 credit score. No one has gotten any readings on that. It's already coming out. But that's not the big problem. That debt is what's causing the problem. And the debt starts here. So the credit card debt, as of the end of last year, $870 billion Americans have held in credit card debt. Now, last year they were saying, well, Americans must be doing great because they're spending more money. They're buying more things. The consumption has risen on credit card. However, with that credit card debt, here's what you're looking at. Americans, yes, they're consuming more, but they're not paying out of pocket with cash. They're taking more credit. And here's the problem that they're having. Credit cards and more accounts are being shut down. Why is that? Here's one reason, subprime auto loans. 20-year high. These are the states that have the highest subprime auto loans. Now, what's a subprime auto loan? Subprime mortgage, subprime auto loan. You can't afford a regular rate for a car, an automobile. The investment banker said, well, you know what? We make more money. It's higher risk, but more money in return with individuals who have lower credit and lower income. So we lend them a loan for an automobile at 18 to 25+%. And get this, 64 to 76 months on that car loan. By the way, after 3 years, you're upside down in the car and you owe more than the car is worth. So you can't even sell the car, you still owe more money on the loan. We know what that sounds like an upside down house. Student loan debt, this is the problem for the next generation of home buyers that you have, the millennials. They are more burdened with student loan debt than anything else. This is the #1 cause for them not buying a home, not having down payment for the home, is that student loan debt. Here's what it looks like. Currently it's at $1.45 trillion student loan debt. And by the way, you cannot file for bankruptcy and wipe that debt out. It's with you until you get to the grave. I don't think they can pass that on to your children yet, can they?
No.
Oh, no. I better not say anything. Shh. Give them any ideas. I know this is depressing, right? Seeing these numbers are depressing, but this is a reality. Student loan debt compared to all other debts that are major debts, auto loan, credit card, mortgages. That's how fast student loan debt has risen. this should give you an idea of what to expect with that generation of millennials who are potentially your biggest market for purchases of homes. They cannot afford the regular price homes, especially where the homes are priced today. So that's the everywhere debt. Let's just break down. This is the Fed report and personal savings. So this gives you the trend line of personal savings over the past 3 decades. 2015, so the gray lines are all market crashes. Real estate crash, mortgage crash, dot-com crash, credit crisis, 1987 crash. It was a big crash. One of the biggest here. Look where Americans' savings were 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Look where their savings are now. So when you struggle to figure out why is it people can't come up with the money for a down payment on a home, this is one of the reasons. They're just not saving. Now here's another reason so this chart is important. This should prepare us for the next crash. This is the mortgage meltdown. You see where the employment rate is? Below 5%. On every market crash, employment is always the lowest. Every market crash. Interest rates are always the lowest. Employment is always the lowest. Employment, lowest it's ever been, as of today. So when the crash comes, unemployment spikes up. Wage growth, another reason, challenge with buying homes, regular price homes. So over the past 40 years, and this chart doesn't go past 40, you'll see how the wage growth for the average American, and again, the mortgage crash has not increased. Even though they're saying that American wages have been rising over the past 6 months, the reality is inflation has been rising ahead of those wages, right? So the cost of keeping up with inflation is actually putting Americans behind. Now, so this is a report that came out in the end of 2017, National Association of Realtors, NAR. So I don't say I like to show this report, but let's just bring some reality to the situation. Here's the median income for all realtors, $39,800. That's the median income. Top, bottom, right in the middle, $39,800. Okay. When you're working harder, okay, you're not earning more money. The challenges that are facing you exist in an environment that you have very little control over. What we'd like to introduce to you is the concept of how you can control as much of that environment in your own backyard. We've broken down the short sale process to 9 stages. This process timeline runs through just about every file we've looked at. Not every file goes through this process, but about every file we've looked at, this is what it comes down to. There are about 80 steps in these 9 stages. From that, we can determine how long it will take to get that transaction to close. Our goal within the next year, with another year of hard work, is to get 90% of our transactions closed in 60 days. Think about that. And the reason we can do that is that we've automated most of the processes, most of it's in the cloud. On the back end, our team works through checklists, everything. If it's not automated, it needs a human phone call, which is mostly the problem that Mark will explain, the phone calls and those little tricky things that have to come up. And Lisa can answer some of those in a moment. We manage that from the front end. This is an example of a board that we use to manage all of our files. It's a small, I had to break it down and take a lot of files out and change things, just to give you an idea. So on this board, Lisa can sit and track every file, where they're at in the 9 stages of the transaction. Each file, once it finishes one stage, gets moved along and moved along and moved along. All the checklists are inputted, all notes are inputted in each file. I'll give you an example and just show you what that looks like live. And so this is a live representation. And so I'll just open up one transaction. And from that, let me make that a little bigger. We I had to omit a lot of things that's typically in there for legal reasons. But these are the stages. So every time a transaction gets to the next stage, it gets checked off and checked off. And then it'll be moved automatically to the next board, for instance. So if there's a date it needs, so if Lisa will have in there, here's an online calendar that matches, that tracks everything that, let's go back in time. There we go. And everything's laid out on a daily basis. What calls need to be made, what files need to be transported, what email needs to be sent, downloaded, so on and so forth, and tracked on a daily basis. We do all of that for you. What we say is, you bring us a transaction, we do the work, you collect the commission.
Thank you.
Short sales done for you. Lisa, come on up here for a moment. So, Lisa could tell you all the horror stories, which I hear every week at our weekly call on transactions. And one of the things that we really promote, guys, is that real estate is a great business. It's the #1 business in the world. Stop and think about that. Everyone needs a place to live. Preferably ownership versus rent, correct? And we prefer them because when you're owning, what you're doing is that you're creating more economic economy gets really infused with buying of everything. New car, new furniture, new dishwasher. There's always something in a home. You're stimulating the economy. So a realtor contributes more than anyone else when you stop and think about it. Because you can't buy a home without a realtor. No matter what they do, you can't automate this process to an AI. Artificial intelligence cannot do what a human being does. You have to have a realtor involved with that buyer, seller, the lawyer, the bank, the title company, the insurance company. A realtor has to be involved. So that position is very important. It means that you have a lot of things, you're juggling a lot of plates. Yes, a lot of plates. What you don't need is a transaction that's the hardest transaction for you to work with. And historically, that's been what? A short sale transaction. I mean, that's the bottom line. In the last 10 years, short sales have not gotten any easier. If anything, the banks and lenders make it harder and harder for a homeowner to put a home on short sale. They make it more difficult. No matter, and Lisa's the expert in understanding how do you get around that. How do you coach that homeowner, your client, on how to prepare for a short sale? This is extremely important. The homeowners need to understand that. So your job is a lot about helping that homeowner prepare themselves for that short sale, because this is the most, think about that. There are 5 major stresses in life. Death of a loved one, loss of a job, birth of a child, divorce, and loss of a home. Those are psychologically the 5 major stresses in life. What you can help with, that loss of a home, a homeowner is thinking about, I have a family, my kids, my wife, my husband, my spouse. How do they manage in this stressful time? Your job is working with them. Our job is helping you be better at helping them get through that process. Lisa, do you want to say anything? Anyone have any questions? Because now's the time to ask her.
Well, I'm sure one of the major questions is, how is my commission affected? And your commissions are not affected because we have an addendum that we have you upload into Right MLS stating that the seller's lender is responsible for paying the buyer's transfer and recordation taxes as well as owner's title insurance. And then in return, the buyer pays our fee. So your client nor your commissions are affected at all. Yes,
I have one question.
sure.
If we have a client that is in the process of a short sale, what are some of the requirements that you guys need from us as the realtor to
Well,
get the process started?
there is a new client information sheet that Becky put in your packet. And what we ask is that client to fill that out,
Oh, okay,
and then we will contact the client directly.
okay.
We get started before there's a listing and before there's an offer. So we start the process right away. And the main reason for that is a lot of companies require that there be an offer in order to start the process. Well, the guidelines have changed. The lenders are pre-qualifying the sellers for a short sale. And we've had situations where we've received files from other companies and the client needed to be 31 days behind in his mortgage in order to pre-qualify for a short sale. So the agent had the property listed for several months, and then they received an offer because the previous company wouldn't start that process. Well, now the lender's telling him he has to be 31 days behind. So we weren't even able to start that process until 3 months later because he had just made a mortgage payment. So it's really important to know what the guidelines are for a short sale. Also, FHA loans. FHA has become really strict in their guidelines on who's able to qualify for a short sale. And because the main reason is HUD makes more money if they foreclose because they don't have to pay back the unpaid interest. So HUD will not allow strategic short sales. The property cannot be vacant or tenant occupied for more than 14 months. So here it is, you've listed a property, you've spent money on marketing that property when the client doesn't even qualify for a short sale. So it's really important to let us get started prior to even listing the property, because some clients may not qualify. Some clients, they're just upside down on the mortgage, but they're not financially struggling, or there's not, the 5 reasons why people are struggling. So it's, like I said, it's really, really important to start that process before even listing that property. Does anyone have any questions?
So it's only 1 month behind now? Because before I had heard it was at least 2 months
Yeah.
It depends. Well, HUD is,
longer.
Fannie Mae is greater than 31 months. I'm sorry, 31 days
Okay.
to get started.
You don't know how many of them? Oh, she's
It's
31.
31. Yes, you can start the process.
Okay.
31 days.
And you guys get the bank approval after the 31 days.
So what happens is the client's pre-approved for a short sale, and they'll usually receive either an approval to participate or a letter stating that they've been reviewed for loan modification, deed in lieu, and then short sale. They're pre-qualified to enter into the short sale program. Yes, Mark?
So Lisa, I think it might be beneficial, and maybe maybe I'm jumping the gun on you a little bit, but for you to walk them through, like, from the very beginning all the way through the end, exactly what it is that you do to get these folks to them. Like, I know what you do.
Sure.
You get a contract, then you start looking at it, and you determine, we kind of order title, we see where things are.
Okay.
And then you kind of, it's fluid a little bit, and you're talking to banks. So if you could walk these folks through a little bit of how that, I can see it, I mean, the 60
Sure.
days, but kind of explain, walk them through, and I always like to say it like this, walk them through so like a 6th grader can understand.
Okay, all right, so let's go through the short sale process. So the first process, we don't even have lead on our process steps, but the lead is where you contact me or you let your client, you send the client the short sale information sheet for them to fill out. We receive that back. So while we're receiving that back, that still stays in lead. Once we receive the new client information sheet and the new client package, that will then send the client along with the specific authorization forms for the lender. Then that will go into pre-qualification stage.
Question.
Yes.
This is probably third grader.
Sure.
Someone comes to you and says, I can't afford this place anymore. I want to go a short sale.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they're current on their mortgage.
Okay.
Do I then just say, well, I really don't know, and I have to get in contact with Lisa, and Lisa's going to see if you qualified. Is that what the procedure would be?
Yes, that's exactly.
And you would
the procedure.
contact them, and they would fill a sheet out, and they would say, either you can go through this process, or I can't. Is that essentially
that's.
or would you tell them, don't make a payment for a month?
Oh, no. No.
I'm just wondering what goes on.
I won't legally.
I know.
You can't legally advise.
Maybe you wouldn't say that, but maybe you say, well, you're current on your mortgage. If things get worse, whatever. I'm just saying.
Sure.
If they're current, does that automatically eliminate them from that process?
No.
Okay.
No, and you don't ever, and I'll tell you this from the back of the room. Do not ever tell anybody not to make their mortgage payment.
I agree.
Do not tell.
I agree.
And here's, just so you know, from back here, from my don't do things.
Right.
Kind
Okay.
of thing. You guys.
They will blame you, right?
You're damn right. So you really, what people always need to understand is to stay in your lane.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, stay in your lane. And if you're strategically partnered with the right folks to do things, then you guys sell real estate. That's what you do.
Yeah.
If you recognize there's a legal issue involved, then you call somebody like me.
Yeah.
If somebody wants to talk about a short sale, you're like, great, I've got the perfect person for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Great, I've got the perfect person for you to do this. These folks have been doing this work for a very long period of time, and they're going to get you to where you need to be. That's what you do. So I was always a big one when I was running my foreclosure operations and doing this, is people start crossing lanes. All it does is it just makes it a big mess. So if you stay in your lane, you recognize the problem. I could do this. I could. It's not cost efficient for me to do. Okay? I don't want, first and second of all, I don't want to do it. I don't.
That's why we call her.
I don't want to do this. Because
I'm in agreement. I don't want to do it either. That's the thing is, I've had people where they decided they wanted to buy a house, so they bought a house, but they couldn't afford it. They had to rent their existing house out. So all of a sudden, 6 months later, their tenant
doesn't make their payment, and now they got a problem.
Drops. Now they got a house, a property vacant, or in a negative position, and they're thinking, well, I'll just go short sale on it. I don't know what they can do and they can't
That's
do.
right.
And
it depends on, and a lot depends on whether or not, look, some banks will look at to see what your assets are.
Right.
Okay? I had a gentleman that came to me years ago to do a short sale, and he bought a $1 million piece of property, $1.2 million piece of property down in South Carolina, in Myrtle Beach. He way overpaid for it, and now the house was worth about $700,000. He was about he lost $500,000 in equity, and he's like, and he owed $900,000. Right. And he's like, oh, I'll just let it go for a short sale. And then it was it's a second mortgage property. And the bank said, well, let me see your financials. And they're looking at him, and he's got almost $1 million in the bank. Mm-hmm. And they're like, no, you don't qualify for a short sale. We lent you the money. I'm sorry. Now we ended up working it out, but he had to write him a check. It just depends on the deal. So what you're doing, what I'm talking about is staying in your lane.
I agree. Yeah.
Is when you recognize there's a problem, and in this arena, all you do is say, look, I've got perfect. And then what that does for you is your client then recognizes that you have the resources of folks behind you that you can pass off to that are also, because everybody's always worried, if I pass off something to somebody else, then I'm not going to make my money, right? If I pass it off, I'm getting cut out. When you strategically align yourself with really good partners that stay in their lane and do their job, they're also protecting your position in the deal,
Sure.
so that you continue to get paid. You're not going to just pass it off and I'm done. No, they're going to ask you to do things.
Does Lisa
Okay.
charge the potential person that fills out the form a fee?
No, she cannot.
Gotcha.
No.
She
Comes
cannot.
from the bank.
Now, if you came to a lawyer to do it, like me, and
Right,
I
then
wasn't
they want a
associated
retainer
with them,
fee, right.
I'd say, look, here's the way I do it.
Right.
You're going to have to give me a retainer. I charge hourly. I'm allowed to charge these folks. And there are some of these short sales that Lisa would pass back off to me. For example, the guy that I was just talking about
Right.
in South Carolina. I needed to jump in on that to negotiate him writing, instead of him writing a $250,000 check, having him write a $100,000 check, okay? Because that's not the hardship that she's talking about. The 98% of the people that you're going to deal with are going to be the folks that are going to be able to jump right into her plan and be able to move. So you have one, you contact her, she'll take it over, and she's going to tell them. And if it doesn't work, she's going to come back to you and say, look, I can't do anything for him.
Okay.
But most of the time she can. Okay, I don't want to jump in on
No,
that.
I
but-
think
Is
you're
a
right.
yes in the lead phase? Is a yes or no?
well,
No,
no, it's
no.
not. This is what
No.
Lisa will talk to you
That-
about.
The yes or no will be under the financial review.
Okay.
So what happens is most lenders will even go a step further. Instead of getting them pre-qualified, they will check to see, does the homeowner qualify for a loan modification?
Mm-hmm.
So they will review them for a home retention review first.
Lisa,
Yes.
I have a listing that's coming soon. I have all the paperwork done, but the house, they had vacated it about a year and a half ago. They moved to Pennsylvania,
Okay.
and they wanted to do some work in it. So we went ahead and got all the paperwork done. They've been up there working on it. A friend of theirs heard about that it was for sale, called me and said, I want to come and look at it. And I said, well, it's not quite ready yet. Well, we understand. Got up there, showed it to them, and they came back and said, wow, it really needs some work. You know, we only can offer, it was like $220,000. Well, that's what she owes on the mortgage. So what we're going to list it at is enough that she can get her mortgage paid. So when I came back to her and told her what the buyers, what their thoughts were, you know, what they had mentioned, you know, it's going to take this much money to fix it up. And I said to her, I said, are you going to be willing, you know, to take less than what what we had originally talked about? You know, we had some wiggle worm there. So she apparently, and we didn't even talk about this, she called her lender up, and she called me 2 days ago and said, have you ever worked with short sales? No. And it was just so ironic that this is happening right now.
Right.
And she already talked to her lender, and her lender already said that they would work with her with that.
Okay.
So in this case, I would give her your contact information, and then you can handle what needs to take place with this step, correct?
Yes, you'll have them fill out the new client information sheet,
Okay.
and then you'll send that to us, and then we'll contact them.
So what happens if somebody comes in and they're in this process of a short sale, but somebody comes in and gives them an offer that pays off their mortgage what they want? Are they obligated to stick with the short sale process, or
No.
can they just
No.
Well, their
And-
short sale would die at that point.
Right, because it's being paid
Because
off
it's
in
paid,
full.
and that's it.
Exactly. And if the short sale does not work out, we don't get paid. We've worked for free.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So if the bank works out a a plan to modify their existing mortgage, but then they say that's a wonderful plan, but I'm not gonna do it. Are they still going down the path of short sale, or are they rejected from the possibility of a short sale?
So what happens at that point, if they're approved for a modification, then there will be a modification payment that they'll have to make. If the client does not want to do the short sale, doesn't want to do the modification, then they don't make that modification payment, and then they get kicked out of the modification program.
But does that then mean they continue with the short sale process?
What will happen is it usually takes about 30 days for the modification to get denied, and then they can get pre-approved. They'll get approved for a short sale. Yes.
Yeah, I actually had a situation where the modification plan wasn't all that good in the
Sure.
eyes of the client, and I don't know what they did really at this point, but
Well, if you think about it, most clients' interest rates are low.
yeah.
So if they're behind in their mortgage payments, then their modification agreement is going to be higher
Yeah,
than lower, because
rates are up.
they're right, exactly, the rates have come up.
Yeah.
And then also the amount that they're behind, that goes in the back end of the loan. So now they have a higher mortgage and higher payment. So the modifications don't work out.
Wouldn't lenders be more apt to do short sales than the foreclosures? Because at least they're getting some money versus maybe no money or very little money. What is the difference there between
Sure.
the two?
So some banks will say, okay, we'll just foreclose on the client and we'll fix up the property ourselves, and then we will resell it. So some lenders, HUD for example, they've said that they'll make more money because they don't have to pay the unpaid interest, plus they will hire a contractor to fix the property up and resell it. So lenders are starting to be more strict on their guidelines for a short sale. But given that, we still have a 92% success rate in getting our short sales closed because we have the relationships with the banks, and we have a great appraisal dispute package that if another thing that's happening is BPO agents will go out to the properties.
You know
You
what
and I
BPO
let-
is?
Or appraisers, right?
Right. Well, we just had a situation where the BPO agent hired an assistant to take photos and went inside the client's property they're not licensed to go into your client's property, but it's happening. But if you're not there to meet the BPO agent with supporting documentation, then how are you going to know that an unlicensed professional is entering your client's property to take pictures? So that BPO agent never stepped foot in that property. So do you think the value is going to be higher? Yes. And that's why we always advise the clients, the agents, to meet the BPO agents or the appraisers out at that property with supporting documentation as to why the value should be this.
Lisa, you made a comment that HUD doesn't do this. So if somebody has an existing FHA loan and they're considering this, they're not going to be able to do it.
Not true.
Not true. That's
Not
right.
true.
You
There's
can.
certain circumstances where they wouldn't qualify, but that's not your responsibility.
Right.
That's our responsibility
Right,
to.
well, you were saying that HUD doesn't have to pay the back interest, so, but it's
It's for,
not my responsibility, it'd be your responsibility to figure it out with the
with
process.
the client, with the lender,
So
correct.
don't rule out people that have existing FHA loans just
Exactly.
because they may or may not, because you don't know. Okay, thank you.
Right, now if the property's vacant for more than 14 months and it's tenant occupied for greater than 14 months and it is an FHA loan that they need to do a short sale, unfortunately they will not qualify for a modification, any type of loss mitigation. They will not qualify. HUD will not allow it.
Is the 14 months only for the FHA?
Yes.
Okay, so conventional or?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So if they're renting it out and it's been more than 14 months, they would not be a candidate for a short sale.
Correct.
Okay.
Or any type of loss mitigation. HUD says we're gonna foreclose because we're gonna make more money.
So as far as the credit goes, a short sale is beneficial by how many years versus foreclosure?
Well, I'm not a lender, but what I can tell you is that with a short sale, there is no code in the credit bureau system. It's put on your credit report more like settled for less than full payoff.
Okay.
Just like with a credit card, if you did a settlement. Now, as far as a foreclosure or even a deed in lieu, a deed in lieu is a voluntary foreclosure. So a deed in lieu and a foreclosure will affect your credit reporting more than a short sale.
And I've got another question about what's,
Sure.
is that another, maybe this is a lender question. You were saying like one guy with a lot of assets, is there like a ratio for assets to debt that they will accept? I mean,
If the client has, an excess, if they're behind in their mortgage or current in their mortgage and they have $10,000+ in their account, the lender does not see that they're financially struggling.
okay. Do they count
So-
IRA and 401k as,
No, because it's not liquid.
okay.
They will look at it,
Uh-huh.
but they could ask for a cash contribution or a promissory note in that case. Any questions? Okay. So with the financial review process, that will be where the lender decides if the client qualifies for a short sale. And then once we get the go-ahead and for the agent to list the property, that goes under marketing. Now, some lenders require that the property be listed for 15 days before an offer can even be written. So we have USDA, VA, and FHA. Those are normally the lenders that will require 15 days. Now, VA, you can have the property on the market for 15 days and you can receive an offer within that 15 days, but you can't ratify the offer. FHA has to be 15 days before an offer can even be written. Becky, did you have a question?
I do. How about in my case where I had this house listed for 6 months and now you just got short sale approval from the bank. So then that's when I changed it to a short sale.
Correct.
Because it was on the market for all that time, I'm covered for my 15 days, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, this short sale process is if you haven't even listed that property.
Okay.
So if you've listed a short sale and are in the process, then you're in this part here, this stage here. But the client still has to go to the financial review. I mean, on our short sales, we can flip-flop. We can have, offer document and submission, because a lot of times the agents come to us when they have an offer because they didn't know of the new guideline change.
How long does it take to go from pre-qualification and through the financial review? 30 days, 15 days?
The financial review process, well, the pre-qualification is for us to receive our paperwork back
Right.
and send the authorization form to the lender.
Okay.
And then once we're authorized, we're going to find out what does that lender need in order for the financial review. So the financial review process takes about 30 days.
Okay.
Once the
Thank you.
lender receives all the documents that they need.
And however long that takes, could be a week or two.
Correct. So once they have a complete package, then the 30 days starts. Now, offer submission and documents, what happens in that stage is you have an offer, well, you notify us of an offer. We'll send you our contract package with checklists that you know what's going to be needed for the short sale. We firmly believe in checklists because that way not only you but a buyer's agent knows exactly what is needed, because most lenders don't allow electronic signatures. When a buyer's agent submits an offer, they don't know that. So we actually give you a buyer agent checklist to upload through the Bright MLS. So during the offer submission and documents, once you have the ratified contract, you're going to submit the ratified contract. We have an account executive that reviews the contract for completeness to make sure all your I's are dotted and T's are crossed. Because the lenders are looking at these contracts and listing agreements. So our account executive is in charge of reviewing your listing agreement as well as the contract. And then we'll order the settlement statement, and then it gets submitted to the lender. The offer gets submitted to the lender. And then we go into valuation. That is when the lender will do the value. They'll either hire a BPO agent or an appraiser for the property. Now, it's possible that during the financial review, the lender did the valuation. So, like I said, these stages can flip-flop. So you won't need won't need a valuation, because you're going to already know what to list the property for if the lender did that process during the financial review. And then the step goes to analyze offer. Now, during the analyze offer, this is going to be where, if the bank counters, then we'll advise of the counter offer. Now, this could be counter as far as cash contribution from the seller, promissory note, and we do a lot of the behind the scenes work, where if the bank comes back and says we want a cash contribution or a promissory note, we will negotiate that with the bank until our hands are tied. And then at that point, we'll contact your client and advise them, okay, this is what we've done. What we now need for you to do is we have a sample contribution letter that we would like for you to provide to the bank. And then we'll get a counter, a very minimal contribution or promissory note for your client. Because our bottom line is we're working for your client.
How does a promissory note work? Is it, let's say, sign this note for 10,000. Is there a time frame on it? Is it?
Yes. So a lot of times the lender will give a client 10 years at between 0 and 5% interest for the 10 years, and they'll say, okay, we want X amount of dollars per month. But to be honest with you, 95% of the short sales, they don't have that. No.
It would make sense, yeah.
Right.
Well, the only thing that does happen though with that is if they do forgive, if there is that debt, that piece, that's not, say they owe 200,000, okay, and they only could sell it, and their net was 150, they had $50,000. There used to be a provision in the federal law, which is now gone. During the foreclosure crisis, that was debt forgiveness, and they didn't have to pay income taxes on it.
Right.
But now, that 50 grand, they're going to issue a 1099, and they're going to that's going to be reported to them as income,
Right.
and they're going to owe income taxes on that. So, and not to take away, and sometimes that's not a bad thing. I mean, they can deal with the IRS and making a payment plan on their taxes, and if they got sufficient losses, they can talk to their accountant about that. But a lot of folks come in, they're only $10,000 upside down, okay? They're only $10,000 or $5,000 upside down,
right.
$10,000 upside down. And they look at it, and they're gonna get a 1099 for that 10 grand. And they're gonna have to report that as income taxes and pay income taxes on that 10 grand to the feds. And now if they're at 25% income taxes and 10% of the state of Maryland, they got $3,500 that they owe. They're going to owe in income taxes, so they really got to look at it. So sometimes when you look at it and what it does to their credit report, tanks their credit report, it may be that they just don't get that deficiency, and they work out this deal where they agree to the note on the 10,000 payable over a certain period of time, because then it doesn't trigger a 1099 for income taxes because the debt's not been forgiven.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
it doesn't do that. Second thing it does is they don't have $3,500 to be able to write a check right away. They can stretch it out over time. And the third thing it does, it doesn't ding when their credit gets hit for the short sale, it doesn't hit it as hard because there wasn't the debt forgiveness. So it really is a look at on the whole thing, and that's what Lisa's group is going to kind of give you some advice on, and then they're going to need to really talk to whoever does their taxes and whatnot to really give them that final piece of it. But if it's like 60 grand or 70 grand or 80 grand, they're never going to be able to repay it. They're just not. It's going to tank their credit report. They can rebuild their credit report a hell of a lot faster than to pay $80,000. And then they go to they talk to whoever they're doing their tax returns with, and they go deal with that issue themselves as far as that is concerned. And there's the abilities if they go and hire the appropriate tax consultant, that they can get the IRS to do an offer and compromise against the 80 grand, that against the taxes, and they work out a payment plan there with the IRS, and the interest rate is a lot less, and there's a lot of issues that need to be addressed there. But so there's, again, stay in your lane and having these resources of people behind you that can give them that proper advice. So if you know somebody that does taxes and you're looking at that short sale deficiency of a big number, and you have a friend that's a CPA, and you want to say, hey, and by the way, not only do I have this lady that's going to do it, and I have this lawyer that knows what he's doing, but I also have this tax accountant that really understands this issue around short sales. And if you're looking for someone, I'm sure Lisa knows somebody, I do too. And then, and you got a team of people in place.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have a question about were you referring to, I missed, were you talking about that taxable income from a foreclosure or from a short sale?
Foreclosure is not debt forgiveness. Okay?
But
There's
the
no
short
debt
sale is,
forgiveness
okay.
on that.
Alright,
Because you still owe the money. You
Right.
get foreclosed on, okay? And you owe 200 grand and it only brings $150,000 at the foreclosure sale. There's a deficiency of
You're still
50,000.
paying that back.
You still owe the money.
Yeah.
The question, debt forgiveness under the federal regs is the bank says, you don't owe me the money anymore. I'm forgiving it. In a foreclosure situation, they're not forgiving it. Okay? They are not forgiving the debt. Whether they elect to come after your client for that is completely. You ever heard the expression, better to owe it to you than cheat you out of it? Okay? Well, that's what it is. They still owe the money. And if you still owe the money, then it's not treated as income. That's as far as I go with my tax advice on that. That's it.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
But that's the difference.
But a
okay?
lot of the homeowners have that misconception that I'll just let the house go to foreclosure
Right, we do.
and I won't owe anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I'm sorry, but that's not the case because the bank could come after you. And guess what? There's no statute of limitations of when that could happen.
Well,
So-
that's not true. There is.
Okay.
There is. They have, if it's foreclosed on in the state of Maryland, they now have 18 months to, from the date of the foreclosure to proceed to a deficiency judgment in the foreclosure case. However, every one of the notes that are signed are signed what's called under seal. If you look at the note, it just said, you ever seen a thing that said seal next to your signature line? Okay, that in Maryland extends a normal statute of limitations from 3 years to 12. So there's two competing arguments, whether it's 18 months from foreclosure, and we are of the opinion that means that they can only bring the deficiency action in the foreclosure case within 18 months. But then there's the other side that they can sue on the note outside the foreclosure, which takes a little bit longer, a lot longer, but then they would have 12 years from the date of default. So there is a statute of limitations, and it can be a very long period of time.
Right.
And if you're talking about, there's a big difference between somebody's principal residence that they're foreclosing on and whether the banks are going to pursue them. But if it's one that they vacated and now they own something else and they've gone and see, if you're going through that and they see that they got money, well, Wall Street lends money. They don't lend money. It used to be, well, I borrow the money, and if I can't pay you back, you just take the house. No, they're lending you the money. Okay? You're giving them collateral. These guys that sit up on Wall Street that own where all this money really is, how many people have retirement funds? Okay. Have you ever looked and saw what your retirement funds are actually invested in?
Everything.
One of the things you'll see that they're invested in is called asset-backed securities. Asset-backed securities. Anybody know what that is? Mortgages. So I was in court one time and the judge was looking down at me and he says, Mark, Mr. Whittstadt, who owns this mortgage? I said, well, it says Deutsche Bank as trustee for such and such and so securitized all the way 2013-3, right? That was the name of it. He says, who is that? And I looked at him and I said, well, that's you. And he says, what do you mean that's me? And I said, Your Honor, I know this because my father was on the bench. I said, have you ever looked at your retirement funds, your pension, where your money's being? He said, yes. I said, you see that thing that says asset-backed securities? He said, yeah. I said, that's what these loans are. Now, this particular one, I don't know, maybe you have it, but it's people like that. People start understanding that that's where the money really comes from. Talking about $12 trillion in mortgage debt. That's your money. That's my money. That's the Baltimore County Police Department, the Fire Department, the judicial system, the state of Maryland, all these places. You ever seen it where they talk about what your AAA bond rating is for the state of Maryland, how they borrow money? That's all comes, it's not this magic pot of money that if you don't pay it back, people don't want it. They do want their money back. And if they have the ability to get it back, they're coming, those deficiencies are sold to collection people that every one of these, they want to get back something. So it's best to, to make sure that you have the team in place to be able to protect your clients to the best way you can. And that's why short sales are good. That's why understanding what foreclosure does to folks, how a deed in lieu works, okay? But foreclosure doesn't make you any money. A deed in lieu of foreclosure is not going to make you any money. Either one of those happen, she don't get paid, you're not getting paid, I don't get paid, okay? And sometimes, I'm not saying that sometimes that's not the best result for your client. So if it is, that's what we're in business to do. We can't steer them just so that we get paid. That doesn't work. That's not allowed to what happens. But most of the time, the short sale process actually does work out best for them. And that's why that's part of the waterfall of the loss mitigation opportunities that the banks are required to do under the consent orders.
Let me jump in with Mark on this. Two things: collateralized loan obligation, the collateralized debt obligation. The loan obligation is what businesses are doing today to borrow money to cover their debts. And part of that is that the Federal Reserve is the only organization that will give out money and not say, okay, well, I demand it back. But the Federal Reserve is not the federal government. It's a total separate entity. They lend money globally. As a matter of fact, we just lent a few $100 billion to Canada for some reason. Canadian banks came to America, the Federal Reserve, and said, can you lend us money? And they loaned them money. One of the things that you need to help your clients understand, because short sales is not well known in the marketplace. Not every consumer is aware that the short sale option is there for them. And you need to educate them on that. The foreclosure is the nuclear option. And when I say nuclear option is absolutely, you don't want to push that button. You go into foreclosure as a homeowner, you're wrecking your life for a few good years. Sometimes, especially if we go into a recession, it could be the rest of your life is wrecked financially.
So if somebody's in a foreclosure, you see that now, can they turn that into a short sale?
Yes.
Yes.
Part of the waterfall process under the consent orders back in, what is it, 2012, all the banks, when they got TARP funds, right? Mm-hmm. We all know they got bailed out. You all seen the movie Too Big to Fail, right? They all got the money. As part of that, there were lawsuits that were filed by all the state's attorney generals against all these banks. And they entered into what's called a consent order. And the consent order required them to pay a bunch of money into a fund, but it also did a lot of other things. And what it did was, it said, look, we have to have single points of contact. We have to, you're obligated once they go into default, and they redefined what default was from 90 to 120 days. And then they said, look, you got to take them through a waterfall. The goal of most people is not to lose their home. The goal to most people is home retention. So how do we go through a home retention? Well, they look at it and they say, okay, how far are you behind? Can you just make a payment and bring it current? That obviously works out best for everybody. Second is, can we enter into a forbearance agreement? Where a forbearance agreement just says, look, we know we're $10,000 behind. We got laid off, but now we got our job again, and we were making $1,000 a month, and now we can make $1,500 and catch up, and you'll forbear foreclosure as long as we make that $500 extra a month to catch up to 10 grand we were behind. Once that's done, you're current, and everybody's back. The third portion, the next thing on the waterfall is a modification agreement, where they basically will look at what you're in default and say, oh, what's your situation now? And then they'll say, well, that 40 grand, we're going to push that to the back of the loan, or we're going to take half of it. They're going to work out some type of deal where they modify your loan. Maybe they bring down the interest rate. Maybe there was some some interest forgiveness, there was some principal reductions, but those are gone. And they would push stuff to the back of the loan and restructure the debt. That was a modification agreement. After that, they'll look at a short sale, okay, which is what Lisa does, and which these guys groups do. It's the short sale process, and if they can do that, then they try to work their way through that. If the short sale doesn't work, then they'll look at a deed in lieu of foreclosure. And a deed in lieu of foreclosure basically it says, look, we're going to foreclose on you. We've exhausted all other options, but we're going to allow you to transfer the property back to the bank and give the bank the property in exchange for releasing the balance of the debt, or maybe working out a deal with a payment or whatever. And then the last option is there's just you won't give us a deed in lieu of foreclosure, or you can't because you owe 50 other people money that are all liens on the property, and we can't get clear title back to it. And the only other option left is to take it to a foreclosure process, and then you're out. That's it.
But
That's
remember,
pretty much that
Lisa said
waterfall.
92% success rate
Right.
on short sales done for you.
And that's why that short sale. These people have gotten to this point with the short sale. Pretty much, they've talked to their bank before. They're behind. They've talked to them. They already did. They've already tried. They've already went down the. Probably a lot of them already have forbearance agreements in place, which they failed. Right.
Yes.
And some of them have gone through the modification, and they haven't been able to uphold their end. But they're still required, as part of this process, to re-go through that waterfall process.
Yes.
And they'll get to the short sale, and then you get to the 92% success rate. But, sometimes it just,
Right.
sometimes it just doesn't
doesn't
work.
Because of the multiple liens that the homeowner
Yeah.
has on the property.
Yep.
So if you see something, a foreclosure, and you contact the homeowner, I guess these are some of the scripts I guess Becky handed out, the process that you need to do. But basically you just find out if that's something that they want to pursue or not, and then just give them your contact information, and you basically handle that. The beginning part
Yes.
of it, and then there's parts where
Correct.
we as an agent would be involved.
Yes, and the majority of the clients that are approved for a short sale are behind. They are in foreclosure.
Okay.
Now,
And foreclosure can move pretty fast.
yes,
So one of the I go back to the consent order was this dual tracking, which they would take people down the loss mitigation waterfall at the same time pushing them through foreclosure. Once they've gotten to the point, there's a certain point in the loss mitigation opportunities for them. If it looks legit that they're going to go, the consent order said that they couldn't do dual tracking anymore, which couldn't push them down the line in foreclosure. They would actually kind of stop it, put it on hold to allow these loss mitigation opportunities to be looked through. So that gives your client, what that does for you is if you can do that and you can get them to lease up, what it also does for them, it allows them to stay in their home a little bit longer.
So are most people that are in foreclosure already are aware of the short sale, or they're not aware of it? So that's where we as an agent steps in and say, hey, here's another option for you, so that you won't owe, or give them a little bit of the information about, do you understand what a foreclosure is, that type of stuff,
right,
and then you can present this to them. Okay.
correct.
And that's a great piece of information for us as agents, because we are focusing on pre-foreclosures right now. And the short sale, people don't realize that short sales exist, and this is your opportunity to say, don't let it just go to foreclosure, because you're still going to owe them that money. So
Still
that's
gonna
your
be on your
buy-in.
credit
That's your,
report.
So-
just call Lisa and give her, some information, and she'll tell you if you can help her or not.
So if we're sitting with a new client and we know first off that they're headed towards foreclosure, and we know that there's different stages, is it our responsibility to get all into that detail? No, we just basically want them to go ahead and initially fill out your
Right.
your form with the information. But
Yes.
to me, I was just reading the form, and it feels like this is the same type of form that we get, like if we want a pre-qualified, basically to refer them to a loan officer or something like that. Is there anything else that you need to initially get them started? Or
Oh,
is this,
absolutely. That is just the stage, that is just the initial, where you send us the information, because we're going to need to know who is their loan with. So that way we can send them the specific authorization form. And then because guidelines change all the time with these lenders and paperwork changes all the time with these lenders, we want to make sure that we have the most current package that we can send your client. So what we'll do is once we're authorized, we will find out what is needed for the short sale.
is it,
For instance, Select Portfolio Servicing, they now require the agent to complete a BPO form. And whereas before, that was not a requirement. So we're going to advise you and the client what it is, what's needed to start that process.
okay.
On your new client information sheet, do they only have to complete the top part of page 1 and then you fill out the rest of that? No, they
No.
need all the whole sheet.
Correct. And
Okay.
I would highly recommend you using that sheet, not just for short sales,
Yeah.
for your regular listings. And the reason why I'm saying this is because in the new client information sheet, it states, have you ever done a modification? And we've had several situations where the client thought this was a regular sale and they were moving forward to settlement. Guess what? They modified their loan and the bank took back a second mortgage because it was a principal reduction modification. Well, they're not gonna, the bank isn't gonna receive any payments. It's at 0% interest, and the only time that it's due is if they refinance or sell their house. So my suggestion is to use our forms, because that way you'll know, and to make sure that payoffs are ordered. Because if it was a principal modification, then it will show up in the payoff statements.
Do lenders themselves have short sale agents, if you want to say, working with them? Is there some lenders that will not allow us as agents to propose to the homeowner to go with you? Are they going to request that they go with the
No.
people that they
No,
know?
no,
Okay.
they can't do that,
Okay.
no.
You had mentioned,
Oh, I'm sorry,
you
you,
had mentioned that, the buyers pay your fee?
Correct.
Is that something then that we have to state in the listing remarks when we finally list the property?
we have you create a general addendum, and we have the verbiage in our listing packages for you. Becky, did you print out the listing packages?
I did not.
Okay.
Basically what it does, it just,
It's in dockets.
there's a, basically what it's doing is just shifting from, it's shifting what buyers would normally pay. It's not adding, it's not adding any money to the buyer's net, okay? But what it's doing is, we understand that the seller mortgage company will allow certain charges to be placed onto the seller side. And so we take certain things that would traditionally, in a traditional sale, be a buyer's obligation and push them over to the seller. But then,
Shifting that.
but then put onto the buyer's side certain obligations that in a traditional sale would never appear. Okay?
Right.
That's kind of what it is. It's just,
So basically in our disclosures, disclaimers that we attach to our properties when it's on the MLS, that would be something we would be able to let the buyer's agent know.
you would see, there would be, you would have the
The
listing
addendum.
addendum. Just like you put on the disclaimer disclosure, upload that, and whether you're
Right.
disclosing or disclaiming, you're also gonna put up the addendum that the short sale addendum that
Being
shows
handled by you
all
guys
that
and
stuff.
all that.
They'll give it, they'll be all part of it.
That's what I was